Part 1. Introduction. Who I am. My name is Marcus Rain, 43 years old, senior detective in the Coldwater County Homicide Unit. Every detective has a personal rule they swear by. Mine is simple. Never return to the place that broke you. For 23 years, I held that rule close. Because 23 years ago, my little sister, Hannah, vanished from a place called Camp Ridgewater, a safe summer haven, as the brochures used to say. She was 13, bright, restless, the kind of kid who laughed even when she shouldn't. And then, one night, she simply didn't come home. They searched the lake for weeks, dragged the woods, interviewed counselors who barely remembered her name. Eventually, the sheriff shook my mother's hand and said, "Some things don't have answers." But I never believed that, because Hannah left something behind. Her journal, pages filled with strange drawings, coded notes, and whispers about a ritual near the lake she'd seen counselors performing at night. The sheriff ruled it child fantasy. I knew it wasn't. I buried the truth so deep inside me that it calcified, and I built a life on top of it. Until 3 days ago, a deputy called me at 4:17 a.m. His voice was trembling. "Detective Rain? We need you at Ridgewater. 2 teenagers dead. Another missing. It looks bad. Really bad." The place I had avoided for decades was calling me back. And I realized something. You can turn your back on the past, but the past always finds a way to tap you on the shoulder. Part 2. Arrival at Camp Ridgewater. I arrived at dawn. Fog crawled across the lake like a living thing. Wind rattled the flagpole rope against the empty flag. Camp Ridgewater looked dead. Deputy Clark, barely older than the campers, walked up with a clipboard he kept pretending not to drop. "Detective Rain, I didn't think they'd send someone like you." "What does that mean?" I asked. He swallowed. "This case, it feels cursed." We walked toward Cabin A6, crime scene tape flapping like torn wings. Inside, silence. 2 beds, stripped bare except for enormous dark stains. Blood had seeped between the wooden floorboards. Clark tried to steady his voice. They were found around 2:40 a.m. No signs of forced entry. No defensive wounds. Just gone. I studied the shattered window. Glass blown outward. "Something escaped," I murmured. Clark's eyes widened. "Escaped? You think?" But I was focused on the floor. 3 long gouges carved into the wood. Not scratches. Not claw marks either. Deliberate. As if someone had dragged metal, or fingernails, in rage. The air smelled faintly of lake water. That was the first thing that made my stomach knot. The lake always smelled like secrets. Before we left, I kneeled by the bed. Something glinted underneath. A bracelet. Not just any bracelet. A silver charm shaped like a tiny fox. My sister's. Impossible. I closed my fist around it and stood up. Clark didn't notice. Good. Some things I wasn't ready to share. Part 3. The survivors and interviews. The remaining campers and counselors had been moved to the main lodge. 12 teenagers. For adult staff members. But the air felt wrong, like everyone was rehearsing fear instead of feeling it. I started with the counselors. 1. Laura Mitchell. Early 30s, precise movements, clipboard held like a shield. Her smile strained, her hands shaking only when she thought no one was looking. 2. Derek Cole. Athletic, nervous, eyes that flicked toward every window as if expecting someone to appear there. 3. Mason Hale. Camp director. Overweight, sweaty, stammering when I asked basic questions. He reeked of guilt, but not the murderous kind. More like decades of covering up the truth. 4. Sister June. Short, barefoot, pale as a candle flame. Eyes like still water. Too still. Something about her presence made the teens shrink away. I asked the group, "I need to know everything you heard, saw, or felt last night, even if it sounds stupid." A girl named Tara spoke first. The scratching under our cabin wasn't an animal. It sounded like fingernails. Derek tensed. I checked. It was nothing, but he said it too quickly. Then a boy named Riley added, "I saw someone outside around 1 a.m. Bare feet, pale feet." The whole room glanced at Sister June. She didn't blink. She simply smiled. Not warmly. More like she was remembering something. Part 4. The woods and first real clue. I followed Ethan's last known path into the woods. The deeper I walked, the colder it became, unnaturally cold. No wind, no insects, just a suffocating silence. Then, a scream behind me. I spun around, flashlight raised. Tara was running toward me, panic warping her face. It's here. Someone's here. She dragged me to a tree. Carved into the bark were words so deep the blade had bitten through to the inner wood. Turn back or drown with them. Fresh. Minutes old. My pulse hammered. Then I saw the footprints. Ethan's shoes. Clear. And next to them, bare feet. Small. Light. Careful steps like someone trained to walk silently. The trail twisted deep into the forest until I found something half buried. A backpack. Inside, Ethan's hoodie, a bloodied flashlight, and an old photograph. 5 kids standing by the lake. One of them was my sister, and behind them, counselors, including a teenage Mason Hale. Part 5. Interrogation of Mason. I threw the photo onto Mason's table. He stared at it as if it were poison. I didn't know she was your sister, he said quietly. That's not what I asked. Mason's voice cracked. Look, 23 years ago, there were rumors. Girls saw things, heard things. We found signs, but the sheriff said the media would tear the town apart if Ridgewater got shut down. So you all covered it up, I said. He didn't deny it. Detective, I'm telling you, something dark stayed here. You think those kids are the first? Who else? I asked sharply. Mason hesitated, then whispered. Kids vanish every few years. 1 or 2, always written off as runaways. My hand tightened around my sister's charm bracelet in my pocket. Mason leaned closer. And detective, there's more. I think one of the counselors has been here longer than she says. Sister June, I asked. Mason nodded slowly. She doesn't age, doesn't change. She walks the woods barefoot at night. I caught her whispering into the lake once. She said it answered. Part 6. The tunnels under the camp. Mason led me to a hidden hatch behind the storage shed. Underground tunnels aren't uncommon in old camps, but these felt wrong immediately. The air was damp and warm like breath. I crawled through the narrow passage until it opened into a wider chamber. Symbols were carved into the stone. Spare the water. Feed the lake. She waits below. This wasn't random graffiti. This was ritualistic. In a corner, I found Ethan's phone. I played the latest recording. His voice trembled. She's following me. She has no shoes. She's saying the lake needs another one. A shriek cut the audio. I pocketed the phone. At the far end of the chamber was a rope ladder leading deeper underground. A scraping noise echoed from below. Not footsteps. Dragging. Something or someone was down there. Part 7. Sister June's Secret. Back at the lodge, Laura caught me outside. There's something you need to know, she whispered. Talk. One of us isn't who they say they are. June. Laura swallowed. She arrived 6 years ago. No resume. No ID. Mason hired her because she said she'd worked at Ridgewater decades ago. But she looks 30, maybe younger. We searched June's cabin. Inside, bundles of herbs, rusted surgical tools, jars of lake water, and a wall covered in newspaper clippings. All of missing kids connected to Ridgewater, including my sister. Pinned in the center was a scrawled message. The lake remembers every soul. The door creaked behind us. Bare feet. June stood there. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Laura backed away. I stepped forward. Where is Ethan? June's head tilted slowly. The lake is hungry, detective. It always has been. Before I could react, she bolted into the woods with unnatural speed. Part 8. The final hunt at the lake. Fog smothered the lake. Visibility, no more than 10 feet. We formed a search team, deputies, counselors, flashlights cutting through white void. Then we heard it. A boy's voice. Faint. Help someone, please. Ethan. We ran. He was tied to a wooden post on the pier, shaking violently. Before we reached him, June emerged from the fog, knife in hand, barefoot on wet wood. You shouldn't have come back, Marcus, she whispered. You ran from the truth once. You won't run again. What truth? I demanded. June smiled eerily. Your sister didn't drown. She fought. The lake took her. because the men of this camp fed it children. Lightning flashed. For a moment, I saw something under the water, a shape larger than any person. June leapt at Ethan. I fired. She fell into the lake. The water churned violently, as if something beneath was thrashing. Part 9. The Journal and the Real Conspirator. We recovered June's half-conscious body, but something else floated up, a sealed box. Inside, Hannah's journal. Her last entry described a cult formed from camp leaders, rituals at the lake, threats, notes about exposing everything, and 3 counselors involved, names blurred by water damage. Only one name survived clearly. Derek Cole. Suddenly everything clicked. Derek was always at the cabins during scratching noises. Always first to check the woods. Always insisting things were normal. June wasn't the real killer. She was a witness. A survivor who snapped. Derek was the continuation of the ritual. And he was still out there. Part 10, Epilogue. Camp Ridgewater shut down at sunrise. Kids evacuated. Counselors detained. The sheriff desperately trying to frame everything as a wolf attack. But I had Hannah's journal now. Evidence that could burn the entire system to the ground. As I prepared to leave, Ethan approached me. Detective, I remembered something. Derek talked to June before everything happened. They argued. She said he betrayed the lake. I felt the ground shift beneath everything I believed. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't madness. It was a war between 2 people who both knew the truth, but wanted different endings. I looked back at the fog-covered lake. The past had dragged me here, shown me its scars, left me with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain. This story wasn't over. Not for Ethan, not for the missing kids, not for my sister, and definitely not for Derek Cole. Because somewhere in these woods, he was still watching, and I was coming for him. Goodbye.